Welcome to the road to Acapulco. There's a new idea in town, an idea that's been heralded by Bob Podolsky for 32 years. It's an idea that will change the world, and it's beginning to take shape in Acapulco.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first podcast of the road to Acapulco. Essentially, just to explain this in the beginning, we've had the great honor and understanding to meet the great Bob Podolsky. And so we've got him here in Acapulco, and it's become a really interesting and intense experience as we've started to learn and hear, about Bob's story and some of the things he's done in his life. And so it was my idea that we get this information out to the rest of the world, because Bob is a very wise man who's got a great deal of experience and knowledge that needs to be brought out to the rest of the world. And in addition to that, he's come up with a new technology which I like to refer to as the Octologue, but Bob refers to it as, what do you refer to it? Holomat.
The Titania Project.
The Titania Project. So, without that, does anybody else want to say it? We've got three people here. I, myself, and Michael Nimitz. Obviously, Bob Podolsky, the star of the show. Mm-hmm. And tonight we have with us Erica Harris, who's also a very intelligent lady and got a great deal of things that we could bring about her, but needless to say, she's just a great person. And welcome here. Welcome to the show. So I think for tonight, what we're going to do is kind of talk about our first experiences with an understanding about what a genius Bob is. he is a genius. And so I guess each of us are going to tell our kind of introductory moment that we discovered, wow, this is something interesting, and we need to look into it. The Octologue, what it can do for the world is amazing. And so for me, my first recognition that this was something that really I needed to pay attention to was, I just gotten into watching Jeff Berwick and his Anarchast thing. And so Bob's interview popped up. And I think that this was I believe this was prior to the first Anarchapulco, wasn't it? Or was that interview after?
I think it was after.
Okay, so that was the second Anarchapulco. So I guess I was here in Acapulco, and I saw your interview, and I thought, wow, this has some real ramifications, because I thought about some of the experiences that I had, in my life as far as being in a tank crew in the Army, and some other experiences where I had a group of people like an Octologue, just about the same amount of people, 8 being the optimum. But, in those circumstances, like when I was coaching a basketball team, as a matter of fact, was one of them, where we had, I think, 9 people essentially contributing to this effort. And, it really, we did some really amazing things, because we all kind of wanted to add our, where exactly was I at? But watching the Anarchapulco or the Anarchast video, that really got me thinking about different times, and some of the information that you said just caught my eye. Uh-huh. And then as I started to actually listen to it a second time, then I really caught on to some of the other things that I thought, this is really genius. I think I need to look into this even more. And so then I started looking at YouTube videos of some of the stuff that you'd said, and then looking at the website and everything. So I knew, this is something really exciting, and I'm going to be looking forward to seeing you at Anarchapulco. And so then that's, fast forward to then, and then actually meeting you in person, and then taking you to a workshop. And it was at that point then that I was like, wow, this is really exciting. And so then I invited you over to the house, and we were going to have a party here at the house. So like the third night of the workshop, I wasn't able to go because I was going to be having this party here with all these dignitaries from all over the world.
Right, I remember that.
So I couldn't miss that one because I was the one throwing the party. So anyway, we kind of made some arrangements, and I said, as soon as the thing is over, why don't you come out and we can have a talk at the house, and we're having a party with all the other people. And
didn't happen. But as fate would have it. Yeah.
But, luckily, I knew that this, now. So, knowing that, what I knew now at that point, and unfortunately not having the opportunity to get some more time with you here, we ended up going in different directions. You returning to home in Arizona, and me being here. And so then I think I did correspond with you on Facebook and so forth. And, actually when you were here still, I wanted to actually kind of form the Octologue immediately because I thought we had the people that would be able to do that. So I was like, I've got the people. let's do it right now. But that didn't happen. So then, I did correspond with you, and I, essentially wrote a little essay about why I thought this was a great idea, and our community should adopt this. So I wrote that little essay, and then I actually sent it to you and said, what do you think about this? Do you think I got some good ideas? And, he wrote back and said, look at Appendix 5, because essentially what you wrote is what I wrote about what I was talking about, or how it made sense to me even more from my college experience. I was going for my master's degree, and ran into this idea in Charles Deming's 25 admonitions.
Deming, yes.
So here it was, him explaining how Deming's ideas were ethical, and that's why they work so well.
Right.
So essentially, I guess that's pretty much what leads us to where we are today. When you look at the long story, is that that relationship continued, and here we are.
Yay!
We're making some real waves now. So that's mine.
I can easily piggyback on that. Real easy. So, shortly after the conference, Anarchapulco 2016 was over, then, I was still here, obviously. And I was in Walmart shopping, and I ran into you, Michael. And we sat down at the little deli area when you first enter, and we were chatting, and it was just exciting, to be out doing something mundane and then see a friend, okay? Yeah. And so, and you filled my ears with this idea about an Octologue and Bob Podolsky, okay? You were on fire, and I thought you were a little crazy. I didn't know what you were talking about, but I could see that you were completely, possessed by this idea. And then every time after that I saw you, you had some like addition about it. It was evident. So for months I heard about, and your excitement about nurturing the relationship with Bob and all that. I mean, so you were nursing this idea all along. That caught my attention, just to see your faithfulness. Even though I still didn't understand, I didn't know what it was, but your consistent, red hot excitement about it, it spoke volumes. So then when you finally, saw the constellation ready to form, then I was inclined, just based on your behavior. Okay, so then I started looking into, Bob Podolsky. So the thing that got me hooked on you right away is that your former life and then your current life. And like the former life, I said it sounded to me, like very, very mainstream, traditional, vanilla, like physics sort of, so all these things I would expect of like a matrix dweller. Sorry. And
that's me.
And then, after you had some sort of transformative experience, and then I'm like, he talks like I talk, like he uses the, that I resonated with so many of the paths that you've gone down in the realms of like personal development and the just non-physical reality in general. So it's interesting to think back to that Walmart experience, and then now having been a part of an Octologue that formed, and that is meeting and becoming solid, and so we've come a long way. But that's how it began. I was just so fascinated by that fact that you allowed yourself, to be transformed in such, I thought, a really profound way, and you changed lives so drastically. And
is there anything else you want to say about your discovery of the Octologue?
There is one more thing. And it has to do with something I didn't expect. It was an unexpected benefit about how the benefit that it has on relationships. So the thing is that the relationships, they're already like in rich soil. We're already soulfully connected. We're just a tight, loving group. So it didn't occur to me that like an instrument like this would have like this added benefit relationally in just trying to like move through certain processes. And I mean, so it's been enriching in ways that I didn't expect. And that's all I got for the moment.
Okay, well, thank you very much, both of you, for sharing those stories. I'm very touched by each of you and by what you've been doing. I'm almost overwhelmed concerning my feelings about what you've accomplished since last February. I mean, it's amazing. And it's the kind of response I've been looking for 32 years and not often finding. And that's why I decided I've got to go down here and stick my oar in the water and move us ahead. And I'm really committed. So I'm going to tell you a little about my story, how I got into doing what I'm doing and what it meant to me. I grew up as a youngster in the home of a man who was a world-famous physicist. And that had a profound effect on me. First of all, I learned the basics of science and scientific method when I was still quite young. And I became very much devoted to discovering truths about the world. And I grew up in a culture of that in my family, that exploring the world and being as perceptive as possible and understanding what I'm seeing, these were all good things I was taught. I was also screwed up by my parents because they weren't good parents. They loved me, they cared about me, but they didn't know much about parenting, and I suffered a number of emotionally disabling traumas as a youngster. So I started out following in my father's footsteps to be a physicist, and I spent 10 years doing that. I worked for GE and Bendix and Avco, and then I worked for the government, for the Air Force, and then for the Coast Guard in civil service. And I really was dedicated to becoming a scientist professionally. What I didn't understand was that I was working for a series of cartels. And I had no idea about cartels in those days. And I had no coaching most of my life, my younger life, about how to make decisions as an adult. What did that mean to even be an adult? I didn't get to be an adult until I turned 40. I mean it. I was infantile in some ways, in a lot of ways, up at least until I was in my early 30s. And then I started to grow. And my experience changed dramatically when I realized that I had failed at marriage 3 times, and maybe the common element in those 3 experiences was me. And therefore, maybe I was the problem. And fortuitously, at that time, a friend who wished me well said, "You know, Bob, you might benefit from some therapy." Now, at that point in time, I was insulted by that suggestion because I thought that therapy was for the sick. And I didn't think, I'm sick. Hey, I'm not sick. Back off. Well, the person who had suggested that I might benefit from some therapy said, "You know, Bob, I benefited from therapy. It's the first time anyone ever admitted to me that they had been in therapy," and I was a little bit aghast at that. And then I said, "You know, therapy's ridiculous. How could someone's life be changed by sitting in a room and talking with another person? It's just absurd." That's what I told myself. Meanwhile, I had grown up in a family where expressing fear and expressing anger were both forbidden. And so I thought of myself as very rational, never imagined I had such feelings.
It's back.
Yeah, well. So this person who was suggesting I go to therapy said, "Well, you know, until a couple of months ago, I spent my whole life stammering. I couldn't get a sentence out without stuttering. And then I went to see this therapist and spent 2 hours with him, and I haven't stuttered since." And I went, "Really? How could that happen? How could sitting and talking with someone result in such a dramatic change in your experience?" She said, "Well, I don't really know, but I suggest you go find out. You might find something of value there." So I did. I went to see that therapist, and I decided that he might know something I didn't know, and maybe I could learn something. And particularly, I wanted to learn something about relationship with my wife, because she sometimes threatened to kill me, and in fact, a couple times tried to kill me. I didn't like to think of myself as a physically abused husband, but that's what I was. And it was dangerous. Literally. So I thought, well, I better do something about this. Maybe this therapist can help. And he did help. And he then also turned me over to another therapist who helped even more, who turned me over to another therapist in the same organization who helped me a little less. But it was okay, because by then I realized my life is dramatically improved by my change in understanding of who I am. And you know, Foster Gamble, of the Gamble family, who's the producer of the Thrive movie, he has spoken at length about how all the important stuff happens as a result of the inner exploration. And he was right. It certainly described my experience. I went from being someone who was not worthy of anyone's trust to being someone who is worthy of anyone's trust. And I made that change come about through 10 years of therapy, which I did hammer and tongs. And I took training programs. I joined a variety of training programs. I learned 6 different kinds of therapy, and I'm able to use them simultaneously and to combine them, which I don't know anyone else that does that, but it's very effective. So I became a really effective therapist. And I began that practice in 1974. So I was pretty good at it by the time I met John David Garcia in 1984. I saw an ad in the paper for a weekend-long workshop on creativity. And it was free. Oh my gosh. Here's a guy who had walked away from a $100 million business in San Francisco, bought a ranch in Elkton, Oregon, and he's offering free weekend-long workshops, room and board included, on creativity. How could I lose? So I took my wife and we went and attended one of those workshops. He had been already doing this for 3 years, and I spent the next 17 years doing it with him, collaborating with him to find out what this process was that he was using and what's it good for. And it transformed my life again. Okay, so I'd gone from being the uptight physicist to the emotionally competent therapist to being something else. And I don't even have a word for what it is. But the first thing I learned from John David that was really important to me was the importance of ethics. And I had taken a philosophy course where ethics was part of the curriculum, and the professor had to fill a term with this material. So of course he had to pad the course. He had to put in all kinds of things about what did Epictetus say on this subject, and what did Aristotle have to say, and what did Plato have to say, and so on and so on and so on. And it seemed to me like mental masturbation. In fact, less satisfying than mental masturbation. But anyway, I decided, after studying with John David, I decided that the most important subject in the world is ethics, but it shouldn't take a whole term to learn it. We could start learning it in grade school, yeah, and be good at it by the time we're in high school. But we're never taught it anywhere. Well, it turns out the philosophers in universities who can teach it, they've got to fill a term, and so they throw in all this extra stuff that's irrelevant to applying ethics. And the other place you can learn ethics is in a religious setting where the priests and ministers and so forth want to mystify ethics so that you keep having to come back for them to interpret the word. I have no use for that. So I'm going to now give you my 5-minute course in ethics, and we'll call this the capstone of this first podcast. I often have had the experience of being in front of a group, and I ask a question. I said, put your hand up if you live your life ethically. And everybody's hand goes up. Oh, fantastic. I'm so happy for you all. Who can tell me what an ethic is? What is the nature of an ethic? Hello? Where are all the hands? Nobody. Well, it's a very simple question. And the answer is simply this. An ethic has 2 parts. Every ethic has 2 parts. Part number 1 is a description of the value that you want to maximize or increase in your life. The value. Could be happiness. Could be pancakes. Could be anything. You decide. Part 2 of an ethic is a belief or belief system that tells you how to act in order to get more of the thing you value. Oh, so I could pick pancakes or anything else and any belief system I like, totally arbitrarily, if I wish, and call it That's my ethic. Ha-ha. Now, this is why people think ethics are trivial, because it's so arbitrary. But then comes an interesting fact that I hadn't even considered. Sometimes, when you behave in accordance with the belief system, you get more of the value. And sometimes, if you act in accordance with the belief system, you get the opposite of what you value. So an ethic may be valid or invalid. And that's an objective criterion. So it's correct to say that there is an objective basis for ethics. If it works, you follow the belief system, you act in accordance with it, you get the thing you value. Terrific. Now you've got a valid ethic. But most ethics that people use these days are not valid. And the institutions that we turn to solve societal problems consistently make unethical decisions. Oh my gosh, those institutions cause the problems. If they can't cure them, they don't know how. So the question becomes, is there a valid ethic? And if so, what is it and how can I work with it? Now it gets satisfying. It turns out that there are only 4 known values that you can use to create a valid ethic. There may be many others, but we don't know them. We know truth in the objective sense of the word, awareness, love, and creativity. These 4 values, any one of them can be used as the basis of a valid ethic. And in fact, if any of them increase, they all increase. If any of them are diminished or limited, they're all limited or diminished. Therefore, they're logically equivalent in this sense to one another. Okay, so if that's a value, if these are values that work, what's the valid ethic that goes with it? What's the belief system that goes with it? And it's pretty simple. Here it is. An act is ethical if it increases truth, awareness, love, or creativity for at least one person, including the person acting, without limiting or diminishing any of those values for anyone. Period. I've just stated a valid ethic. And while there may be many others, I haven't found another one yet that isn't a logical equivalent, in that any logically equivalent one is simply one that either uses the same values in the same belief system in some other form, or which results in the same behavior. In other words, faced with a choice, okay, we know how to make an ethical choice based on this valid ethic. If another ethic works, you'll make the same choice. So a logically equivalent ethic is one that results in the same choices. Great. Now we've got the basis for something new. And John David and I and a few other people studied the application of ethics in groups. And we spent 17 years together doing that. And John had already done 3 years before that. So there's 20 years of systematic research went into what we have produced. Originally, John called our invention an octet, a group of 8 people, an octet. And the fact that 8 people worked, a group of 8 people is very efficient, very creative group. You can hold a conversation in a group of 8 without having to pass a talking stick around. You want to say something, you speak up. You wait for a pause in the conversation, you speak up. So we got that. Okay, 7 or 9 are almost as good. You go below 7 or above 9 and the creativity of the group drops off. We had some crude ways of measuring creativity, and that's what we found, that the peak creativity is in a group of 8. So John called that kind of group an octet. I brought in some other constraints and changed the name after John died. Yeah, you can ask a question.
Oh, okay. I was curious about the crude measures used to test creativity.
Yes.
Can you describe them? How did you do so?
I will give you one example. Okay, because it gets fairly complicated.
Okay.
But the simplest example is, in the course of a conversation, you'll have a moment when someone internally says, "Oh, that's a new idea. I hadn't heard that idea." So you can get a group to actually count the occasions on which they have that kind of thought.
Okay.
Oh, a new idea. Ah, a new idea. Every time someone identifies an idea as being something new to them, you make a hatch mark.
Okay.
Do, 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 do.
Nice.
You count the times. And the more there are, the more creativity is happening.
Okay.
So that's an example. And we had a few others, but they're all of about equal strength. In other words, none of them perfect, but none of them trivial either. So we did the experiments and we found, okay, 8 people, great. What else do we need to do to optimize a group for creativity? Because if we do that, we're also optimizing it for truth and love and awareness. Wow, how do we do it? So we worked on it. We worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. And here's what we found. First of all, such a group has to make unanimous decisions. If you're constrained to always make unanimous decisions, then anytime you don't have a unanimous consensus about something, you don't have a decision. The group hasn't made a decision officially. Okay, unanimous. How do you make unanimous decisions? Well, most people think that's really hard, but it's not. It's very easy once you get the swing of it. And I'm sure that you guys have been practicing. You understand this. Let me give you the simplest example. Here we are, 3 of us sitting in a room together. Any dispute about that? No. Well, are we doing this voluntarily? Yes. Oh, and was our decision to meet unanimous? Obviously. Here we are. That was easy, wasn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's usually that easy. And when you run into a stumbling block where it's not that easy, you've got something worth discussing. Oh, now we've got some kind of a disagreement. That means we have an opportunity to learn something new. Because if you don't have disagreement, you're just repeating the same old pattern. Mm-hmm. So disagreement is a good thing.
Yes.
In that sense. Okay, so that's where I'm coming from. Is we said we got the right number of people. We also experimented with different balance between men and women in the group. 4 and 4, 4 and 5, 4 and 3, and so on. And we found that as long as the number of men and the number of women doesn't differ by more than 1, we have an optimized balance between the two. So if we got 9 people in the group, it's going to be 4 and 5. Mm-hmm. If we got 7 people in the group, it's going to be 3 and 4. And it works. It works. Okay, so what else do we need to do? Now we've got a group where we've got balance between men and women. We've got a small group. We can easily hold conversations. What else do we need? Well, one of the things that makes a huge difference in bringing about an effective octologue is having an agreed upon ethical purpose. That's really the starting point usually. And it usually starts with one person. Somebody says, wow, I've got this great ethical idea. It's going to improve people's lives. Woo, my goodness. Who wants to do it with me? Okay, so you start out with one person with some new idea, and sure enough, others decide to join in. Now, in the process of joining in, you always want to massage that purpose description because you might want to make it bigger. Maybe you don't just want to do this one little task that's a good thing. You want to do a bigger task that encompasses that smaller task. And so frequently as people join, the scope of the group changes. And that's good. It's evolving. So now we've got an ethical purpose, the right number of people, the right balance between men and women. What else do we need? What else can we do? The next thing we did was we decided we are going to give each other feedback with the greatest possible honesty. We're not going to spare anybody's feelings. We're going to tell it like it is. So if you don't like something I'm doing or saying or expressing, you tell me just how you feel about it and what you think about it. This is what I hear you saying, Podolsky. This is what I think about it, or suppose about it, or imagine about it, or fantasize about it, or assume about it. In other words, these are all different kinds of thoughts. That's what I think, and this is what I feel. When I think that, I feel happy, excited, angry, sad, fearful, whatever. So we've decided in such a group to give each other that kind of blunt, effective feedback. But more importantly, we've decided that when someone's giving us that kind of feedback, we're going to listen. That doesn't mean we necessarily accept the feedback as factual and valuable, but we're going to listen as if it were, and then sort it out afterward. After we've wrapped our mind around it, we know that we understand it, and we have given signals to the other person. This is what I hear you saying. Am I really hearing you? Okay, we want to have an interactive thing like that, and it works. We wind up with very ethical communication within the group. And is this automatic? No, we have to learn how to do this. But it's easy to learn. Okay, I was teaching this back when I was working full-time as a psychotherapist. This stuff is stuff that I taught. I've taught thousands of hours of therapy groups, and I know how this stuff is done, and I can teach others to do it. And that's what my mission is. There's one more feature of the Octologue that makes it different from a committee, because everything I've described so far is a distinction between a committee and an Octologue. Okay? A random group of people can be a committee, but they're not an Octologue until they've taken these steps. Understand the ethics, choose an ethical purpose, have the right numbers, the right balance of genders, and good feedback. Now we're almost home. We added one more thing to this. And by the way, this is an ongoing evolutionary process. What I'm describing is not the end of this road. It's just a waypoint along the way. This has to evolve. And it's going to be up to some of the people hearing this podcast to make it evolve. And you guys, and the group that has formed around you, you're already doing it. I love it. I'm really excited. Really excited.
Yeah, I can certainly just to interject here. Now forming the Octologue and being involved with it, and even though it's just in the beginning, I can certainly say that we feel the power, and just the changes in our lives and the feelings that we have towards each other, even that we basically agreed to, become accessible to the other people for each of our purposes, means I just feel stronger.
Right.
And I feel more inspired every day.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
You might think what it'll be like when most people, when they get up in the morning to go to work, instead of going to a job in a hierarchy and going, oh no, I've got to go to work. Instead, they wake up and they go, wow, I get to go to work in my Octologue. That's going to be a big change.
Yeah.
And that's coming. Thanks to this group. This group is going to make that happen worldwide. I really believe that. So, okay, one more thing. We've discovered through trial and error and some inspiration on someone's part, probably John David, we discovered a ritual, if you will, by which we can amplify temporarily, maybe permanently sometimes, amplify the creativity of the group. It's a shared meditation, and when we're doing it, it feels like sharing a dream. Imagine being in a dream and seeing your friends, and they're in their dream, dreaming your dream with you. That's what it feels like. I don't claim that that's what it is, but it feels like that. Okay? We go into a meditative state, an altered state of awareness, and we make a certain kind of commitment. Okay? We have discussed ahead of time a challenge or a problem to be solved or an objective to be thought about, some purpose for this conversation, and we converse in that in our normal waking state before we do the amplification. Then we do the amplification, which we record, and the rule that we apply to our own behavior in the course of it, once we go into that altered state, is if I get a new idea that I think is relevant to this discussion, I initially push it away. Mentally, I push it away. No, I'm not going to say that. If that same idea recurs, I oblige myself to share it with the group, no matter how strange, weird, bizarre, or even obscene it happens to be. Whatever it is, I'm committed to sharing it. It gets recorded. Later, when we're not in that altered state, we go back and listen to the recording, because frequently the most creative things that go on happen to be the ones that seem really bizarre, really strange. But when you examine them, sometimes using psychotherapeutic techniques to do the examining, because that can be very helpful, when we examine them, we discover wisdom in them that we never would have guessed just by listening to them superficially. And with practice, a group can get really good at doing this amplification ritual. Now, you continue on until someone in the group says, stop. Okay, I've had enough. Let's quit. Anyone in the group can do that. The exercise is done sitting in a tight circle, making physical contact with each other. And we have a series of things that we do in our awareness to synchronize our brains while we are doing it. Do we have an objective way of measuring the synchronicity of the brains? No, not yet. Will we ever? We might. Is that important? Maybe not. The important thing is we have an experience which acts as if our brains are synchronized, and now together we can reach out into the quantum universe and bring back new ideas, which may or may not be true ideas. They could be false. So we have to test them. We do not assume that a new idea is necessarily a true piece of information. But we have criteria for determining the truth or falsehood of information. Oh my gosh. How's that? I'm going to answer that question. And then we're going to call this meeting to a halt for this time, because there's a lot of information for one brief meeting.
Well, Bob, before you do that, though, I think, Erica actually is the one that really took note of that within our group. And really felt strongly about, the chapter in your book about that.
About which?
And I just want to get
about the amplification?
Her feelings about that idea.
Okay, sure. Let's
on
hear
the record, since
Okay.
we're here.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Talk about what
Sure.
that chapter did.
Sure. Well, when you introduced us to Flourish, you also, kind of like encouraged us to dive right into chapter 4.
Yes, I did.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
I did.
told it to.
He did too.
So I did.
I suggested it. He suggested it.
Right.
You did it.
And I did it. And I wasn't engaged. I wasn't engaged. And then I went and looked at the table of contents, and then I saw the word amplification, and it jumped out at me, chapter 13.
Oh.
And I said, sorry, Michael. And I went straight to 13, and I devoured it. And so that is where I got my hook for the Octologue. And
what's that chapter about? What's that chapter about?
Amplification.
Amplification.
Yeah.
There is a percentage, it's a small percentage, but a significant percentage, of the people who get involved with the Octologue technology for whom that idea of the amplification is like the crown or the cream on the, or the cherry on top of the pie or whatever. I mean, for some people, it's the most important feature of the whole technology.
Well, it's interesting. So I feel like I'm one of those people, because that literally was the thing for me. And is it okay just to say that, like the diversity of our group, they experienced some maybe discomfort around what, perceived mysticism.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been one of the things I'm saying, like even relationally, like how we lovingly come to terms with the fact that like something that's really important to you is something that's really uncomfortable to me. How do you
deal
work
with
through
it?
this? Yeah. So, and affection intact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So anyway, I remain, I was like, amplify, and I
Great. Well, you're going to have plenty of opportunity to amplify and to make contributions to the amplification know-how, because again, it's something evolving. It's pretty good already, but there's always room for further evolution. Okay, so where was I?
Well, you're going to explain the last part of the the initial idea of what makes an octologue different.
It's the amplification. The amplification ritual is either the most essential piece of the whole technology, or it's the icing on the cake, depending on who you are. Okay? You are the second person, only the second person of all the people I've exposed to these ideas, the second one who sees it as really, really important, central, big deal. Great, I'm fine with that. I don't see it that way, but it's okay with me that you do. And it's okay with me that my former roommate does, because that's how he sees it. He and I have done amplifications, just the two of us. You can do it. It helps if the person you're doing it with has had significant experience in meditation. Well, my former roommate meditates every day, so he took to it like a duck to water. And some people never meditate, and they might find this experience exhilarating or even frightening. And if it's frightening to someone who's in that group, then the amplification doesn't work. So if one goes into it and finds you're afraid, it's really important to extricate yourself. Say, oh, I can't do this right now. I'm feeling fearful. Someone else sit in for me, or just do it without me. And that works. And in fact, if you observe the group doing this a few times, most people get over the fear if they have any to start with. The fear, it turns out, is fear of closeness. Because when you're sitting in a tight circle with your arms over each other's shoulders or holding hands, and maybe your bare feet are touching, and you are breathing in time with your neighbors, and you are imagining images similar to what they are imagining, things happen. Something changes. It is mysticism. Every great scientist was also a mystic. Why do I say that? Because the creation of new science is not a scientific process. It's outside the box. And in fact, knowledgeable scientists will usually agree that for a new idea to be valuable, it has to seem crazy at first. If it's not crazy enough, it's probably not a very good idea. An example. A lot of people think that Einstein's special theory of relativity was the venue in which we found out that in physics, measurements are relative to something. Okay? It's like he supposedly figured out that things are all relative. Well, that's not true. Everyone knew that ahead of time. He discovered something that was not relative, which is the speed of light. It's the same for everyone, no matter where you are or how fast you're moving or in whatever direction you're moving. When you measure the speed of light, you get the same answer. It's not like sound. If you do sound, the speed of sound in an atmosphere, or in a solid for that matter, The speed of sound changes, the apparent speed of sound changes as you move. If you're moving in the same direction as the sound, it lowers the frequency and it sounds different. And if you're going in the opposite direction, it raises the frequency. So if a train goes by with its whistle blowing, it doesn't just go ooh, it goes ooh. You feel this rise and fall. It's coming towards you and the frequency is going up. It gets higher and higher. Ooh, and then as it goes by, ooh, it goes back down. The frequency changes. The speed of sound is relevant. Is relativistic. It's relative to what your motion is. Speed of light is not. No matter how you're moving, speed of light is always the same. That was the great discovery. Not that things are relative, but that something isn't. That was the discovery of Einstein. So that was, when he came up with that, it seemed like a really strange, bizarre, crazy idea, because any kind of wave behavior that we previously are aware of, it has been relativistic, relative to something, to whatever the medium is. Not so with light. And that was a real eye-opener. It turns out that even though the equations of electrodynamics were determined experimentally by Maxwell, called Maxwell's equations, you can derive them theoretically by using a particular mathematical formalism to describe how charged particles interact. You write some equations for that. You solve those equations, and you find out, okay, there's a constant here, C, appears in those equations. If C is if C is infinite, and everything is transmitted instantaneously, because C is a velocity, then you turn the crank of mathematics and out comes all of electrostatics, all of the mathematical description of charges and how they interact when they're still, statics, electrostatic. If you set C equal to a fixed number that's not infinite, a constant, 3 times 10 to the 10th centimeters per second, all of a sudden, when you turn the same mathematical crank, out come Maxwell's equations. Oh my gosh. Maxwell's equations theoretically are derivable simply from real simple ideas about space and time, combined with some formal mathematics that's well understood, and then you make a distinction. Okay, if everything is static, C is infinite. What does that mean? I don't know. Well, C is not infinite. The speed of light is not infinite. Interaction between things does not propagate instantly. It propagates at the speed of light. So if I do something here, the effects spread out at the speed of light, not instantly. So my hand clap doesn't affect that star over there, out there above the horizon. Instantly, it propagates at the speed of light. Well, there are some things that, a few things, that aren't like that. And that's kind of interesting. We'll get into that another time. It was Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen who figured out that two particles can interact and can separate over vast distances, and it's possible to perform a measurement on one and instantly affect what the result of a measurement would be on the other. Instantly. We call this quantum entanglement, and it's a very interesting phenomenon, very much in the news, very relevant to things like quantum computing, quantum encryption, AI, artificial intelligence, and so on. That discovery that you can have things entangled at a distance. When Einstein, Podolsky, and Rosen first proposed that idea in 1935, they were laughed at. But Einstein thought, well, maybe this is real. He called it spooky action at a distance. Now it's quantum entanglement, and we know that it exists because it's been proven 30 years after it was predicted. It was proven in the laboratory. Okay.
I recommend David Robeson
Well,
for talk about string theory or whatever.
Yeah.
Cool.
Resident physicist.
Great.
Yeah,
Right.
Before we end the podcast,
Uh-huh.
I think if people have come this far, this would be relevant.
Okay.
So what I wanted you to talk about was how the thing we talked about, the amplification, might be the next step of our brain awareness.
Okay.
How our brain has come from where it started.
You're talking about the quadrature.
Yes.
Okay. I'll give a brief explanation. Quadrature, dimensional quadrature. That's an important concept. As the neurology of life evolved, and I don't want to get into a discussion of did it evolve or was it created? No. We know that evolution happens. So I'm not going to fight that fight today. But yeah, okay. So how does evolution take place? An atom has a certain level of awareness. What does that mean? It means it has just enough awareness to detect when there's another atom nearby that it can interact with and form a molecule. Oh, okay. Or it could form a piece of a molecule, like an ion. It's a piece of a molecule. Has enough awareness, and the molecule that it forms is going to have more awareness than the atoms had. And so molecules find each other, and they interact with each other and form bigger molecules. And it's well understood now how that leads to molecules that replicate, molecules that serve specific functions in larger groupings of molecules, how that leads to things like amino acids and RNA and DNA and the formation of cells. Oh my gosh, now suddenly we're talking about not only evolution of matter, but the evolution of life. It's a continuum. Each level has higher awareness than the level before. That's what makes it evolution. If it were going the other way, it would be entropy. Okay, so we see evolution at work, and we get some surprises. Okay, as awareness increases and increases, we go from having evolved a fish brain, which is little more than a automatic response. It's like a switch being thrown. Very mechanical. So we have that, and we go to more and more complex changes. And then we have, beyond the fish brain, we have the reptile brain. Oh my gosh, it's much more aware, much more capable, but still very limited and not able to think, as we know thought. And then we have the mammal brain. And meanwhile, our brains are divided left and right, and the two parts are not the same. They work together, they communicate, but they are not the same. So we have two brains at the fish level, left and right, two brains at the reptile level, two brains at the mammal level, and then finally two brains at the neocortex level, but suddenly something happens. A loop is closed because the neocortex can think about itself. We become able to reflect on our own thoughts. Uh-oh, something really new has come into existence when that happens. And that something new is consciousness. Oh my gosh, if you're aware of being aware, you're actually conscious. And if you're not aware of being aware, you're a fish or a chicken or some other lower animal. But there are other critters besides humans that are self-aware. the great apes, gorillas, orangutans, chimpanzees, whales and dolphins, clearly, and elephants. An elephant can see itself in a mirror and recognize itself. That means it's self-aware. And there are probably some birds that have that level of awareness also. Mostly some of the more sophisticated parrots. Okay. So from my perspective, those beings that have awareness of their awareness are people. And those that do not have that are just animals. That makes it possible for me to feel no qualms about eating a chicken. Yeah, chickens have awareness, but they're not reflective on themselves as far as we can tell. There's evidence that they are not able to think about themselves or think about their thoughts. Okay, so there we are. We have this something happens when we reach the cortex level, and that transformation is called a dimensional quadrature. Now, here's the interesting thing. Imagine a planet populated by beings that all belong, or mostly belong, to octologues, where creativity is maximized and amplified. And the relationships between the octologues are all determined by ethical contracts, ethical agreements. And so now the world is enveloped in a whole different culture, and suddenly the biosphere can become self-aware. It's the next dimensional quadrature. It's the point at which human beings acquire the wisdom necessary to make consistently ethical decisions. And we'll be able to recognize it, but we won't understand the mechanism. Because just like human consciousness, we don't understand the mechanism of consciousness, and for sure, the cells in our brains don't understand the mechanism of consciousness. Without them, there wouldn't be consciousness. With them, there is, but it's an emergent property of the combination. It is not something you can localize and say, oh yeah, consciousness is here. No, it's the entire constellation of components that has the consciousness. It's like the consciousness of an ant colony. Ant colonies are far more conscious than any of the ants are. The ants have no idea about that. The individual neurons in your brain don't know about your consciousness. We individuals will not really understand the consciousness of the planet, but we can create it. We can make that next dimensional quadrature take place, and life will be dramatically better for everyone when that happens. In a way, you could say that is the goal of the Octologue. When you combine octologues by ethical contracts, you create what is called a holomat, a holotropic matrix, or holomat. Everything worth doing on this planet can be done within the construct of a holomat. It means no more hierarchy, no boss. No one has a boss. No one is forced to do what they're told to do. Obedience is no longer rewarded as a premium. Innovation is rewarded. Creativity is rewarded. Heightened awareness is rewarded. Wow, what a world that's going to be. And this group in Acapulco is making that happen now. This group is succeeding at this now. And so I want to say to all the listeners out there, you don't have to keep looking for the solution. We've found it. We actually found it more than 30 years ago, and it's catching on. Get on board. We've got what you need. We've got the method to make your life what you want it to be. Live the life you've always wanted. Come to Anarchapulco, which is an event, but guess what? We are Anarchapulco 24/7, 365. We're doing this every day in our lives. And guess what? We love it. It's exciting. It's fun. Get on board. The train's moving out. You can be on board with us. In spirit, intellectually, and even physically. You can come down here. We are putting together a community like none you've ever seen or heard of before. And it's going to transform the world. Acapulco. Acapulco. Get on the road to Acapulco. This is where it's happening. This is the solution to the problem that the world has faced since the dawn of time. We have it now. We're employing it. It's working. Come and be a part of it. You're going to love it. Thank you very much for listening.